Glad to have them here. Pete Manhart is next to me. He's with Bates Commodities out of You want one of those? Is that what it is? Pete is with Bates Commodities out of Normal, Illinois. Bates supplies us not only with Pete in Tuesday mornings at 8:50, but with Kurt Kimmel on Mondays in the morning and the afternoon. And we really appreciate the work that they've done. They're really big supporters of the station. Anytime we need or ask something, Kurt and Pete are always there to help us out, and we do appreciate them. Next to Pete is Jacquie Voeks at Stewart Peterson. Jacquie doesn't actually live very far from me, and so she and I have become good friends over the year. Actually, I'm good friends with all of the analysts, but because Jacquie and her husband Jeff don't live very far away, you might find us together a lot of times. We're out and about, so I talk to her a lot about the marketplace and just what's happening. She helps to keep me grounded as well. She's with Stewart Peterson right there in Champaign County, but and when she first started talking on the air, she kind of had that Wisconsin twang for a while. Yeah, but that's gone. Have you noticed it's gone away? She's been here 6 years now. Is that right, Jacquie? Yes. She's been around for 6 years with us now. And then Bill Mayer of Strategic Farm Marketing. You may have noticed over the years that we have a working relationship with our analysts and not with their companies. Have you noticed that? So our analysts go places. So Zwicker's been where? He's been at Farm Bureau, and he's been with Zwicker & Associates, and he was at Farm Bureau, and then he was at ADM, and now he's at CGB. And we do the same with all of our analysts. So it's about people for us. And we followed Bill a couple of places, and we're really glad that he's at Strategic Farm Marketing. And they, of course, help sponsor our program today, too. So let's talk about the corn market. Bill, we're going to start with you. Can you just kind of lay out the basics of the corn market, the demand picture? I'll let Jacquie take us through supply.
Yeah, I guess that was, I think the change that we've kind of made here in the last 2 or 3 weeks is we've kind of moved the market from a supply focus to a demand focus, which is really what we should be doing this time of the year, and we've done that because of some of the, you never know what the reasons are that's going to come in the marketplace to cause that. But I guess I feel when I look at the demand, our domestic bases or our domestic demand is somewhat limited. I think we've got, I don't want to say limited, but I think we have a pretty good feel for where we're probably going in this crop year on the domestic side of things. Livestock numbers, you know, we have some problems in the hog side of things. We have some, you know, low cattle numbers out there. I think some of that may be offset by the cold, severe winter that we've had, although talking with the hog guy yesterday, you know, they've got some pretty good buildings and stuff for the hogs now. It's not as big a factor maybe as it used to be. Ethanol, very good profits there. We're kind of limited there by some of the blend wall constraints. If we can get to where we're exporting ethanol, which I think is a possibility. Somebody said this morning on one of the panels, it's all about profitability. The blend wall only applies to the United States, so we've got some possibilities there. But still, I think, you know, you're looking at plus or minus a couple 100 million bushel scenario on the domestic side. So I think the export side of things is where we really have the potential to increase our demand, at least in this year and probably the coming year. And that's why I believe that the Ukraine thing has been such a big deal, because they only had, I think it was something like 2/3 of the corn that they're expected to ship has been shipped at this point. So not huge numbers, but very significant numbers if we'd have to come in and fill some of those needs. I do think that there's somewhat of a overstated export. You know, we've already sold 1.328, I think it is, billion bushels of corn. And some of that, I think, is a little bit overstated for 2 reasons. One is that we just had one big hole to fill. And I think we've always got to keep that in mind as we're looking at demand this year. We went through this restocking process and probably are still in it somewhat, but we did have a lot of restocking to do around the world. So I think maybe exaggerated a little bit because of that. And also I think some of the fact that China turned down some of the corn because of the GMO situation. You know, we shipped some corn that went over and then went to somebody else, so the China part of it may be a little bit overstated. But I think we're going to end up with, you know, the USDA is pretty well on the mark. I think this 1.4 billion carryout or thereabouts is a pretty solid number right now. And I guess if we see the conflicts over in the Ukraine, where you've got military action, that something that shows that they're possibly not going to be able to continue to export, then I think, you know, you could up that number.
Can you take me through the supply side, please, Jackie?
Can I add something to the export side?
No.
I knew you would do that to me. No, I don't want to argue with you at all. In fact, I agree on pretty much all of it. The only thing I was going to add is one of the things we tend to focus on all the time is China when it comes to the export market. We actually have what they call the missed countries, which would be, Sue talked a little bit about Mexico, Indonesia, South Korea, and Thailand. And if you look at the total exports that we ship, now that's including everything, not just corn, but about $25 billion goes to China in 1 year. These 4 countries actually account for about $26.9 billion, and it's a growing market. And Mexico, of course, is one of the largest takers of corn that we have. So I think it's a real positive situation, and the same thing with ethanol. You know, if you look at the big picture, a lot of people talked about gas consumption being down last year. Actually, we were up 100,000 barrels a day on gasoline consumption, 1.1%, and that actually is the highest increase we've had since 2004. So that's really encouraging when you think of how good gas mileage is on cars. But take you through the supply side, Todd. Well, how about we talk about the USDA March 10th report that's going to be coming out Monday. The guesses on it are for about 1.495, almost 1.5 billion bushel carryout, a little bit higher than what we had last month. On beans, it's 144, a little bit lower than last month. And wheat, 570, just slightly higher than last month. When you look at the world numbers, though, that's the very interesting side, because every single class, corn, beans, and wheat, are expected to drop at the world level. And it's primarily related to what Sue was talking about when you look at the bad weather. Southern Brazil had the highest record temperatures in the month of January in the history of the country since they've kept track. And it really has caused a lot of problems. When you look at the bigger picture on Argentina, Sue hit on the peso. You know, one of the things that I would caution you about, and I was glad that, in fact, when she brought up puts, I was just writing puts on my thing to say, if you guys are going to wait for new highs to come, you definitely need to be doing puts. And there's a couple things you also need to know. In Ukraine, just like in Argentina, they're sitting on grain for a reason, and it's because grain in those countries is priced in US dollars, but paid in the local currency. Neither of those countries really have real confidence in their currency. So if they get to a point where they have to dump it, if you've heard anything about Argentina, Argentinian farmers are selling new crop beans out of the field and still sitting on 400 million bushels of old crop beans. They're sitting on corn. And one of the things on the supply side, Todd, that I think is interesting, when I was at the Ag Forum, I noticed they had actually lowered the exports for corn for this year, and I asked them why. And they said because last year we had zero competition from Argentina. This year, Argentina, if they can get their government under control, is going to be back out there actually selling against us. So that's one of the things that puts are the way to go. I mean, it's a situation where you just can't take a chance.
Pete, when you think about this marketplace and what's happened in the last week and how Ukraine has played into the marketplace, what it's done to the price of corn, what does it, are there opportunities? Obviously, producers have been selling cash grain. Are there other opportunities that they should be taking advantage of?
Well, when you have bounces up like we had in the last few days, you need to take advantage of if you're profitable. And if you aren't going to sell cash, you need to be buying those puts. When you look at all those government numbers, They've got corn acres going down and bean acres going up. I think both acreages will be up. Our corn price today, our bean price today, I don't know. I didn't see many hands of people going to switch from corn to beans. And I think we're going to plant more corn acres and more bean acres next year to take advantage of these prices that are going up. When we made the lows, we were talking about how big the crop was. Now we're talking about how big the demand is. And I think we have to take advantage of when prices go up, you either make sales as it goes up to take care of your profit, or you protect the bottom side. You've got about 4 things you can do. You can do nothing, wait till you need money and sell it. We've done that in the last few years because the prices were up there. You can sell cash. You can sell cash and buy calls. You can keep everything and buy puts. But there are many ways you can manufacture by selling out of the money puts. I think we've seen lows in corn. I think we could go back down 50 cents from where we've been in the last month, or we went up from 410 to 480 something. Beans went up $1.92 in that same period. Are we going to just keep going? I think we're going to be back and forth now, and I think it's your job as a marketer to do something to catch those prices so you make a profit.
You're shaking your head. You agree with the volatility.
Well, I absolutely agree. I think, you know, waiting for Russia to attack the Ukraine is not a marketing plan. Well, it is
if
really
you're
the
Glencore
truth,
and you like Putin. Oh, did I say that out loud? Oh, any Australians here? No, I hope
And
not.
one of the things that never ceases to amaze me is why we as producers are willing to sit until February to find out what you're going to get for a crop insurance price. If you look back, you had opportunities, and I think one of the things that has to change in our mindset is we're going to have to be more like livestock producers. In other words, looking out earlier than we ever did before. If you looked back, you had opportunities to put puts in place at 570, 580, 590. You can go in money as deep as you want to, depending upon what you want to spend. And I think that if you don't do it to cover bushels, do it to cover your crop insurance price. You know, you can hedge that crop insurance price using the market, but what you have to do is you have to know how to use the tools marketing to do it. And in most cases, that's going to involve puts rather than selling the futures. And so I just think that we're in a changing situation all the way down the line. We're not looking at potential for, I'd love to see 638 Sue. I think it would be awesome, you know, but you don't know that that's where we're going to go. And risk management is all about thinking every single year that you're going to get a normal crop, and so is the world. So that's why you need to be out there looking for opportunities.
Supply, I think we're going to grow more, both corn and beans, but demand, did anybody mention that China's number 4 in beef use now? As I remember it, China doesn't eat beef. They're number 4. They got 1.3 billion people, and they all eat a little beef, and they all want more, and they have 400 and some million middle-class people that all want a little beef. If Chinese had 1 teaspoonful of more bean oil each, the bean oil exports of the world would more than double. They are a huge supply-demand, and if they continue to grow at 6% or 5% on 1.3 billion, that's a huge usage increase. On the other side, more acres, better yield. Matt this morning said, how about if we have a great year? We haven't had one of those in a long time. We're overdue. If we grow 175 bushel corn at 95 million acres, what's the carryout going to be? I still think we have to protect the downside. When we get cash where it's profitable, dribble some out and be ready to do that again.
I just want to follow up on a couple of things that both Jackie and Pete said here, because one of the things we do, and a lot of you out there are aware of it, have come to our meetings. We do a lot of meetings during January, February. And one of the things that we do for those meetings is we put together a profitability analysis. I have some over there at the table for Champaign County, for example. And this is one thing I know, that the profitability analysis that I put together for the meeting that I got coming up tomorrow morning is a lot better looking than it was on January 15th when I put it together for that first meeting that we had in Champaign that day. So that tells me, because that's where my focus is, that we need to be doing something. And I think that's kind of what Jackie and Pete and I believe Sue as well said. I mean, I think we need to be doing something about that. We do have price levels locked in on the crop insurance now. If you're uninsured, you're 15 or 20% that you're not insuring. If you have those bushels sold, you got a bottom, worst case scenario right now. Can you improve on that? Those are some of the questions you've got to ask yourself. Another thing I said early was that we'd made the transition from supply to demand, which we typically do this time of the year. We will transition back to focus on the supply side, and that will come as we move into the March 31st planting acres and stocks report. And guess what? March 31st, we're going to be looking at weather for the first part of planting and have some idea. Now, whether that's going to be positive or negative, I wish I knew that, but I don't.
Questions out here? Somebody's got one? Have you participate with me this afternoon? Who's got a question on corn for this afternoon? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Do you think we're already in a weather market on corn? Consider it's the 1st of March, we've got about 30 inches of frost on the ground and several inches of snow. I mean, do you think that could be cause for a weather market?
Go further north where they got 5-foot freeze line, and yeah, it's going to be later planting.
The question was, are we in a weather market already for corn?
I think that snuck in there. I think the Ukrainian thing came along and maybe masked that a little bit, but I think that snuck in there. I will say that we will be trading what the weather is doing 3 weeks from now, not the fact that we're already 2 weeks behind to start with. I think that'll be forgotten if we see some improving weather.
Yep. And I would say, John, that when you look at the big picture, we have to take into account that what you're seeing on the board over there as to what they're doing, they're already trading in the idea that we're going to gain exports to the Ukraine. They're already trading in the idea that planting is going to be slow. You saw people starting to talk about that already last week. And so everything over there is about perception. And it's always ahead of the game, so you've got to be very careful when you're making decisions. If you're waiting too long, they'll leave you behind.
Other questions? Somebody got one? No? All right, I'll keep asking the question. So on this whole Ukraine thing, where do they land in the export scheme of the world? What number are they? Are they one? We're 1, 2, 3,
They're
4.
the third.
They're 3.
They're 6% of the world's wheat exports,
right?
And 16% of the world's corn exports is what they were projected for this year.
So at least in corn for certain,
they're the third largest.
They're third largest, and they have
after the
impact.
U.S. and Brazil. Yes.
And Brazil. We haven't even talked about second crop corn or safrinha corn in Brazil. So if we've got this third largest country that's in peril at the moment, are they behind, or how much of their corn crop have they moved out already for export? Because that'll make a big difference as to whether it really impacts perception, and then really what happens are two different things.
About 2/3 of the corn has been exported up to this point.
So we still have 30% of it to go. That's enough to make a big difference.
Yes, that's significant.
It's expected to be slower. I've got a guy that you all know, but he actually emailed me yesterday and said this could all blow over by Friday. But what if it doesn't? If it blows over by Friday and Russia decides to stay just in the Crimea and not attack anywhere else, we could go back down what we did. But if it gets worse, we could continue to climb. But even with all that, it's expected their export that they have to remain will be pushed out slower, creating more opportunity for us.
Well, that's the one thing that they've just continuously talked about, is this has not impacted their ports at all at this point in time.
I read yesterday ADM, Bunge, Louis Dreyfus all say it's all operating under normal conditions there, at least at this point.
They both need money badly. They're both in dire straits for money. Yep. They're going to try to continue to ship stuff that they're getting money out of.
Yep.
Right. So let me go back then. The rise that we've had, which most people will say, at least in the last week, has been predicated on Ukraine. We know where they stand in their exports. We know how much they have left to do. We know that they're running normal. How much of a potential break do we have, or is there something else under the marketplace that we will see in the WASDE numbers coming up, or that we might see in the grain stocks that are supporting this market at a higher level than we were just, what, a month and a half or a month ago? And I'm trying to get at the idea here that something has changed more than just Ukraine, because the feeling in the countryside has changed. You went from clear depression prior to the first of the year and just after the year to feeling pretty good. So something else has changed other than Putin managed to drive a few tanks into Ukraine.
I think part of it's South America. South America is still going to have, as I understand it, their biggest crop ever. Yep. It's just not as big as we thought it was going to be. And so attitude is now, oh, they're not going to be as big, so it won't matter. They still have got the biggest crop ever of soybeans to ship out. And lo and behold, they're shipping them quicker than last year. They don't have a 70-day line. I think the line's about 26 days, something like that. But that's still better than 70 days.
Right. That makes you feel better. Oh, I only got 26 days.
But I think
glad
that's
they got
part of
porta
the
potties.
I think ever since the January 10th report, and I think somebody mentioned that this morning, you kind of got a reaction because we did see a lower carryout number come out of that report, and then again in February. And we moved up to levels that farmers were looking for to sell. This is my oversimplification. And we, hit those numbers pretty hard. We had farmers selling. Then we moved to the next level. That farmer selling dried up, moved to the next level. And I think we've done that a third time. And I think that the selling, we had a lot of sales yesterday, but I think that the selling is kind of dried up now a little bit. So we're, possibly go up to the next level we need to shake some corn loose.
We hit that 78 to 82 level on corn on the board, and now we're looking for the 5. When we hit that, we'll probably have a bunch more sales.
Well, and I think it has a lot to do with two different things. One, it was talked about this morning, the fund investment in the grains has really come on like gangbusters, especially since February. So, that makes for a very unstable floor underneath you, depending upon what they're going to do. And I think the other thing that's happened is, well, every farmer that said he was going to sell at $4.50 moved it to $4.60, and then they moved it to $4.70, and now they're probably at $5. And so when you don't have farmers selling coming in, you don't have a big push down because they don't sell the futures to be able to protect themselves. That's what the commercial does. When he buys from you, he sells the futures, protect himself from paying too much.
I think you've seen some of that transfer from the long coming into the market to the short commercial who's hedging the grain that was bought.
Well, right. And I think, too, some of it is the wheat situation. When you look out to the west, we're very uncertain as to what the wheat is going to be like when you get out into Kansas and Nebraska, and even here in Illinois. When you get the type of weather where we've had ice, we've had rain, we've had snow, we've had all kinds of things, it's really tough. And, they planted wheat in the west in dust, and they're just not sure it's going to come out of dormancy. So if you saw yesterday, who was leading the party? It was wheat. And what's wheat got behind it? It had a record short fund position behind it. So that is what they call short covering. In other words, that's not a great floor for you either, because unless you find new buying, you're not going to continue to go to the higher levels. So there's a lot of different things in here, I think, that have changed in the last month.
I think the attitude of despair the first 2 weeks of January when we were at 410 on corn, and I remember beans were what, under 11 new crop, and I don't know what old crop was, but all of a sudden we've bounced beans $1.92 and corn 75, and now everybody's on the bandwagon saying, oh, let's go buy some, it's going higher. Well, that bandwagon might go a little further, but it's come a long way, and it's time for us to use it some and put some money in the bank.
Cooley, you have a question?
I can't hear him.
I can't hear him either.
So the question is, why is, in his opinion, the government ignored the 8 million prevented acres in its projections for new crop, the CRP acres that are coming in, and will we see those acres at some point?
Well, I asked them that when I was out at the Ag Forum, and their response was, okay, what we look at is we look at March planting intentions, and then we look at the variation off of the March planting intentions, and we use an average to be able to do it. So they were very clear about the fact that this is probably maybe the lowest number for corn acres, and not necessarily the lowest number for bean acres. In fact, if you look back at these reports, in most cases, they understate corn acres at this time of year, they overstate bean acres. Now that may change this year, but that was their reasoning. They said last year, when planting intentions came out, we were at 97.2 million for corn, and we actually had planting intentions at the end of 99 million. They didn't know where that extra 1.8 million came from, so they just said this is something that they have a very strong formula for, and that's the way they do it.
And that's why I say we're going to grow more corn acres
Me
and
too.
bean acres for next year, both.
Too.
There's got to be a reason these funds jumped in the last month. I haven't heard anybody.
What's that?
Why is it that is there a reason that the funds were in front of everybody else getting into the marketplace? Why did that happen?
They had no story when we were on the lows. Everybody was talking about going another 50 to $1 lower, 350 corn. I heard 270 corn.
Right.
I heard 950 beans. Now that we've come up some, so they're getting a little excited. Hey, maybe we will hit that 638 or this 1450 or 15 or whatever it is. So, and when a bank is paying 0.001 of 1%,
Right.
and you got all this money, hey, we might as well use it somewhere. I mean, that reality in the financial is, as Mr. Wise this morning talked about on buying ground, some of that's in this market. Why not do something to actually make more than 0.1% on my 100,000 I got sitting there with no use for it because it's not enough to buy ground, and I might as well go, I got that free and clear, let's go buy some corn.
I think, too, if you look at the 2011 lows, we went right down and touched those 2011 lows, and on January 10th tried to drive it through it. The report came out, and we came back off that. So I think it was a technical signal there that told the funds it's time to reverse positions.
Well, in addition to that, you've got to understand that a lot of your fund money is being driven by black boxes right now. And what those black boxes do is they actually trade on headlines. And when your headlines are more positive, they're going to buy. When they're more negative, they're going to sell. But I think the other thing is, if you looked at the cattle market, the cattle market was leading the grain market. There was a lot of fund money in the cattle market. You can only go so far in the cattle and the hog market. The volume isn't there. So when this market started to move, a lot more money came over here. And I think some of it has to do with the CFTC rules. They were really nervous about those CFTC rules and how it was going to impact them. I think they've figured their way around them, and that's why they're back. They never really were gone. There's a lot more money invested there than what you hear about.
Does anyone know what Elwyn Taylor's forecast is for weather next summer?
I don't know. Has anybody watched Elwyn Taylor's forecast for next year? Anybody know what his most recent number is?
How about the guy from Polo? Does anybody know what his is? He predicted drought for 15 years before 88 happened.
Let me
Yeah. Elwyn's predicting.
Larry Acker, Polo,
Oh.
that's it.
Yeah.
let me ask this question. Does anybody remember what our big worry was last year when we were at this meeting? It was dry.
Yeah.
Drought. We're really going to have a dry spring, and that didn't turn out quite that way in most areas.
No.
Okay, so Zwicker always says I'm bearish, so let me see if I can follow up with a couple of things, and I'll get back to you guys in a second. I'm going to go with the fours. 1994, 2004, 2014. Put those in your mind. What are those? And then the month of April, number 4. Because in the livestock, we have so many fewer livestock there. And I know you're going to argue with me about the numbers that they're gaining weight on and how many pounds they're going to, how many pounds they're going to put on. Mm-hmm. But does it not seem to you that with PEDV and so few cattle around, that demand from that sector will have to slack off, or is it picking up and making it up in poultry numbers and in pounds going to the marketplace?
The numbers of actual animals are lower, but if you take the amount of pork that we are butchering, it's more poundage out of less animals, and it takes a lot more corn to get those last 5, 10, whatever pounds on it. Beef, I don't know what the numbers are there, but we are feeding them heavier. And the last 10 pounds, last 5 pounds, last 20 pounds use a lot more corn than the first.
Hang on a second. Chuck and Matt, you both are cattle raisers. Will you put more pounds on your beef cattle before you send them in? Oh, you don't have your feeder.
Right.
Oh, and Matt's raising show cattle for the most part. So, all right. Any beef cattle producers in?
I work with a lot of feed yards.
Yeah.
They're putting 50 pounds more on right now, is what they're doing. As long as you can keep them below 1,400, your feed conversion is still pretty good. So they're pushing from 1,300 now up to 1,350, except on this last show list, because everybody was trying to get the higher dollars from the February cattle before we switched over to April pricing.
Yeah.
But I think, Todd, that one of the things we're all ignoring is the fact that we've had so many cattle and big feedlots that have returned to feeding corn versus feeding DDGs. You know, corn is still king. I did nutrition consulting for 16 years. If I could put corn in a ration when it comes to steers, hogs, anything, I'm going to do it if I can pencil it. And that's what I think is driving feed use at this point in time.
So you said Ukraine is the third largest exporter. What does this turbine do for their production? Food supplies?
Getting supplies out, or just for the next year, you mean?
What's it do for next year's production?
So he asked about Ukraine. What's the turmoil do in terms of them putting a crop in the ground?
I think the big question is the spring wheat. I mean, if you have military action and have conflict going on, there was some concern, at least the way I read things, that, you know, that would be the first crop that would be affected, would be the spring wheat planting. I don't know.
I don't know either. The one thing one of my good clients say, and it makes a whole lot of sense, is, you know, Ukraine supplies Russia with a tremendous amount of grain. That's why they would like to have the ground if they could get it. But are you going to bite the hand that feeds you? I mean, are they going to go into an all-out war in a country that would take away the ability maybe to be able to plant and do those kinds of things? How much of this is really being driven by media more than it's being driven by reality in some respects? Who knows?
I saw some.
I think it's overblown, and they'll plant all their acres. Just like here, if a third of the guys in the county retired this year, would that ground go unfarmed? No.
Yes, sir.
What's your price range on where you think the crop's going to go if we have a late planting, delay, or if we have, looks like it's going to be favorable right in the time? You know, what's your price level, or, you know?
Okay, so he's asking about for new crop, kind of a price range, if we have a late planting, if we have a normal planting. Those two options, right?
I've been looking at a range for a long time already of 460 being in the middle, 560 being at the top end, 360 being at the bottom end. You know, I don't think there'll be much selling at 360, but I never, you know, we're talking about a futures range here is what we're talking about, and so I would never underestimate what they can do if they want to.
I'm not that wide a gap. I'm 410 on the bottom and about 5 on the top, no matter what. Unless we really, what do you call late? If we haven't got planted corn by May 20th, then I'm going to raise corn a bunch. But we can plant corn in 3 days when we're ready. So, I mean, where I grew up, planting corn May 15th usually made more crop than planting corn April 15th.
Other questions? I want to know about 14 and 15. John, what do you want to know about? I want to know about 15. Oh, so his question is, because of the cold winter and the snow, how much corn may have been consumed to keep maintenance on the cattle that are out there? Will that show up in some form?
I would think it'll probably show up, but it depends upon how much of a buffer is already built into feed use. I think probably at this $5 billion level is probably about where we'll be.
I guess I think the number may have been high, but we've worked our way into the number that we currently have on the USDA because of the rough winter, because of feeding to some bigger weights and those things.
15 crop, anything to do with it?
Minimal sales, 10 to 15% if you're wanting to do anything. I'm not a big advocate of it right now.
I'm 30% covered on the board using option positions. Did it a long time ago and have been stepping into it primarily because, well, I said it before, as a risk manager, you have to believe we could have a good year. And if we have a really good year this year, we can pick up enough. I think we have the potential maybe to pick up another $200 million on exports, okay? If we would pick up $200 million on exports, that takes us down to 1.3 maybe. If we have a really good crop this year and then you follow it up with a great crop next year, this could be really sad. So I would rather hedge my bets, basically, and say, okay, I'm going to enter into the arena, but it's all done on the board.
I'd do at least 30% and be ready to change my mind at any time this growing season to protect that in some manner.
Okay, and then turn around, best set of advice for 2014 besides crop insurance at this point?
Besides crop insurance.
Besides crop insurance, yes.
Buy puts underneath both corn and beans, and if you want to make them cheaper, sell lower puts. I had guys selling calls a month ago. They wish they wouldn't have now. I don't know if we're near highs yet. If we get to highs or we turn sometime when we've got highs, then I will look at, to add to my prices, I would sell calls then.
I definitely would buy puts. I think when we talk about learning about the tools of marketing, you can sell calls and you can come back in and use short-dated calls right against them. I don't know how many of you are familiar with short-dated options. A short-dated option trades in March, May, July, and September. It is based off of the December corn contract. It's based off the November bean contract. So you can come in and use that as a direct hedge to try and protect yourself. Now, if the market goes higher, you're going to still have to make margin calls, but you at least have something in your account that guarantees you can turn it into a long futures position if something got out of control, which you can never do with a stop because you're never guaranteed you're going to get into that futures. And or you can sit back and have something that's gaining in your account against the short calls that you currently hold. Because what happens in volatile times like this, you'll see options that are not even at the money gain dramatically. We saw it yesterday. 520s gained a lot yesterday versus, let's say, the 470s. Well, it's because it's further out and people are more willing to spend less. So they're going to go out and buy the further out options. But there are ways you can do it. You just have to find people to work with who understand how to manage the risk.
I certainly don't have anything against the puts. I guess I would rather take the stance of being an aggressive seller and then defending that position by buying calls, short-dated calls, probably September. I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint of if we get into weather problems, I think that that gives me protection against the market really going crazy. And if we don't, I have a better downside locked in with that approach.
Anything else? Other questions? Giving that up. Give them a nice round of applause. Jacquie Voeks, Pete Manhart,